Welcome to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. This episode we're going to be talking about Shadow of the Mushroom Cloud, West Lake. And I have a couple of people who have been actively organizing around problems with the West Lake Landfill. I have Don Chapman. Don, very happy that you could join us
Thanks
at
for
this
having
show.
me.
And Karen Nickel, I'm very glad that you could join us also.
Thank you.
And both of you are with Just Moms STL. Now, what's the connection between Just Moms and a radioactive waste landfill?
Well, I'm the mom that created the West Lake Landfill Facebook group, and out of that Facebook group, we became Just Moms STL. I wanted to make sure that I was new finding out this information about radioactive waste in our neighborhood. I grew up in North County, exposed to contamination from Coldwater Creek, and I wanted to make sure that once I found out this same waste was in the proximity of the home that I had been living in for the past 20 years, I wanted to make sure everyone in my neighborhood and my community knew. And that's when I met Don Chapman through that process. And since then, we've been together every day and working hard to promote awareness and education in our community about what's happening at West Lake Landfill.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, and we wanted, I think, to make sure that people understood that we really were just moms. We were house moms, housewives with kids, and that, you know, when we started reaching out and pulling people in and communicating, we wanted them to understand that there were no fancy credentials needed, that it's enough to just be a mom and be concerned.
Now, do both of you have PhDs in nuclear physics?
No, we are literally just moms.
Okay, so what you're concerned is the health of you and your families and what's going on in the landfill. Now, for people who aren't familiar with it or who have forgotten some of the things that are on TV or in the paper, when was that landfill constructed? Was it 10 or 15 years ago?
No, it's a very old, unregulated landfill that used to be a rock quarry, a limestone quarry. So, I mean, it was a giant hole in the ground back in the 50s where you were allowed to dump anything. Even the garbage now that you're not allowed to put out at the curb, you could dump industrial waste, whatever, in that landfill, and people and companies did.
And then part of it is for the nuclear waste from the first nuclear bomb that was ever exploded in the history of the world. Is that correct?
That's correct. And one part of the landfill, you know, every day landfills use dirt to cover waste every day. After they dump the waste, they cover it with dirt. The nuclear weapons waste was dumped at the top of the landfill, and what the owners and the workers were told that it was clean fill dirt. They lied and illegally dumped it, and so nobody knew any better. And so every time they would dump a load of garbage or industrial waste, they would go up there with shovels, bulldozers, whatever they had, take a load of what they thought was clean fill dirt but was really nuclear weapons waste, and cover that load up.
And so that nuclear waste has been there for well over half a century now.
Almost half a century, 40 some odd years.
Right, and so it's been affecting. We really don't know the effects of the radiation leaking out, and of course there's the contaminants from everything else.
Right.
So we don't know what the interaction. You know, I mean, sometimes when you have two dangerous elements and you put them together, you have things that you didn't get from either one of them. So we really don't know what's actually happening there. So how did you get involved, and how'd you reach people in the area?
I had gone to a FUSRAP meeting, formerly Utilized Site Remediation Program, Action Program.
That's what FUSRAP is an abbreviation
stands for.
Okay.
To learn more about the contamination throughout Coldwater Creek and North County in 2012. And at the end of that meeting, I ran into Ed Smith with the Coalition for the Environment. And we had a conversation. He had some flyers about a landfill that contained the same nuclear weapons waste, and there was going to be a meeting about that landfill. And so I attended that meeting, learning that I was now 1.8 miles away from the same waste that I grew up with from Coldwater Creek.
And so was that a meeting that the Missouri Coalition for the Environment called?
It was.
To
It was a
inform
meeting
the
for
public
the community and we had 20 people there, I think. And I took that information home, and through Facebook, I decided to, engage others. And right now we have over 18,000 members on our West Lake.
Well, from 20 to 18,000 is a pretty good growth rate.
Yes.
That's fantastic. And so I know that Bob Chris has been on this show a couple of years ago with Ed Smith, and one of the things that he explained, which I thought was the most amazing, was that a lot of the nuclear waste would actually increase in radioactivity for something like 25,000 years, which is considerably longer than it's been since the first pyramid was ever built, and it would actually increase in radioactivity. And of course, we're led to believe that, or by implication, if this stuff will stay in the ground for 10 years, it might just go away.
Right. It doesn't become diluted. It actually becomes stronger, more radioactive. So. And
it's actually in the worst place it could possibly be at West Lake, in a floodplain, in an earthquake zone, in Tornado Alley. We now experience an underground smoldering event, fire. So we have had any and everything thrown at us with this landfill.
Yeah, it is amazing, because I know it's in St. Louis area, it's very hard to get earthquake insurance.
Right.
I think we got it for our home, and then a few years after we got it, most of the people the companies wouldn't sell you earthquake insurance because they stood to lose so much money if there was a major earthquake.
Right.
Now, another thing about the landfill is that most people think that when you put something in the ground, it stays there. And 50 years later, you could just dig in the same place and you would find it there. Is there any sort of movement underground?
There's a lot of movement, and unfortunately, while this is in an old quarry, a hole in the ground, it's a limestone quarry, so it's very porous. There are holes. The groundwater comes in and out, and
so the water can take the radioactive. Even if you have a piece of radioactive material which is fairly large, the water is flowing in and out.
Oh, absolutely.
Now you mentioned it's also that it's in an area which is affected by rain and by water, and there's some good photos of the rain coming off of the landfill. Now, what do those photos tell us of all the water in the area?
I mean, it's kind of like Karen said, you really could not have found a worse place on earth to put it. This waste, some of this nuclear weapons waste, is just sitting on the surface and has been for over 40 years. So you're seeing rainwater come through a fence. You can see the radiation symbols in the background of areas where we know it's sitting on the surface, and it's just flash flooding down the hill. It's going into a little drain, and it's going straight into Earth City, which then goes into the Missouri River.
So the water could be soaking into the ground a little bit and then coming out and then go right in, and then taking radioactivity and who knows what else with it into Earth City.
Absolutely.
And so it could be something which is extremely dangerous.
Right. And this is not the first flash flood we've had. It's been there for 40 years, so you have to understand that. When we saw that water pouring down, although it was shocking because we knew what was there, to us it was like, my goodness, over 40 years, how many times has this happened that we haven't been able to see or capture a photo of it?
Now let me ask you this. Is there a Superman in the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, where this super person will just come out and do everything for you? And so if you just find the right person in the EPA, you really won't have anything else to worry about.
No, and I think we joke, although it's very serious, we tell people, and it takes a while, I think, for moms to realize that Superman's not coming. You have to be your own Superman. You have to
utilize your voice. And, we have learned in this process what it takes to get behind the scenes and stand up and really take off your boxing gloves and fight. We are literally fighting for our lives and the lives of our children and trying to get our community back to a health and safe environment.
Yeah, I know that one of the things which is most difficult in environmental issues, whether people are dealing with landfills or toxic incinerators or or lead poisoning or whatever it is people are dealing with, is that it's very hard for people to realize that a government agency might not be working in their best interest, and the government agency might in fact be working for a corporation which has an enormous amount of pull through elected politicians.
You feel naive, don't you think so? Like you think science should win this.
I think that's exactly how you feel. You don't want to give up hope, but at the same time, you feel so hopeless.
And it's like, I think in the beginning we would find science, we would find documents that talked about what West Lake was, NRC documents from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that said how bad.
And it would seem so easy, so like, cut and dry, it's right here.
And I remember we'd be like, oh, Karen, okay, quick, let's call EPA, you know, and it's okay, they're going to take care of it, we have it. And you realize suddenly that it's not about science. It's not a science battle, it's a political battle.
A lot of people, when they first get involved in environmental issues, they believe that if they just show the government or industry how dangerous something is, then the purity of the pure truth will solve the problem. And that's not necessarily the case.
I think it broke our heart when we realized that, because I actually remember sitting in your living room and us looking at each other after we had gotten off a phone call. We emailed them the document, and it was like the smoking gun, and we sat and looked at each other like, they're not going to help us.
Okay, let's take a break now, and we'll be back after we see a brief clip from a really good movie about the West Lake Landfill, which is called Safe Side of the Fence. We'll see just a couple of minutes and some announcements, and we'll be back very soon.
August of 1973, the B&K Construction Company, which was operating as a subcontractor for the Cotter Corporation, basically spread whatever the stuff they didn't want anymore, which they declared to be barium sulfate cake, and then scooped it up along with whatever was remaining in the other areas of the site, along with the topsoil, onto trucks and dumped it into the West Lake Municipal Landfill.
This is the wrong place for the materials. Geologically, the site's not only in a floodplain, floodplains are subject to liquefaction. This is a place of high rainfall. It has earthquake hazard and liquefaction that can not only harm levees, but make the landfill slump. It has all kinds of geologic hazards. So for all those geologic and hydrologic reasons, this is a stupid place, and the landfill doesn't have any of the protective barriers that are required for just ordinary domestic waste, and certainly not for this kind of material.
My name is Debbie Cream. I serve as the Community Involvement Coordinator for the West Lake Landfill site. I've seen many of you before, and we welcome you here tonight.
After investigating West Lake, the EPA had signed a record of decision in 2008 that recommended placing a cap over the contaminated areas of the site and monitoring the groundwater. On this evening, they would confirm the presence of contaminated material in the site, but not commit to removing it.
Welcome back to Green Time. I'm host Don Fitz. We're talking about Shadow of the Mushroom Cloud, West Lake, and we're talking about the landfill there and what effects of nuclear waste can have on people and how people organize concerning it. And we have a couple of people with an organization called Just Moms STL. We have Karen Nickel and we have Don Chapman. And I want to thank both of you for spending the time to talk with us about the issue. Now, one of the things that people need to do, if you find out that you give information to the Environmental Protection Agency and it gets buried in a black hole someplace and never comes to the light of the day, you might have to start organizing yourself. What have you done to go from 20 people at a meeting to 18,000 people on the list?
Well, I think for us, when we met each other and we decided that the rest of the community needed to know, our first instinct was we have to have a meeting. And so it began the process of looking for a place to have a meeting and spreading the word. And people came, you know, they came and they just kept coming. And we've reached out to organizations, the Franciscan Sisters of Mary.
Oh, good.
The Missouri Coalition for the Environment has stood by our side and has mentored and helped us tremendously. You know, we reached out to our fire protection district, our school district, every area, our hospital, SSM Health. You know, we have supporters everywhere, and that's what we continue to do. We continue to, our main goal is to educate and promote the awareness of this issue, and however, social media, however we need to do it, knocking on doors is what we've done.
And build kind of a small, I wouldn't say small, our coalition that supports us is pretty big, but also to reach out to other people, research people who have been in similar situations. One person that's been incredibly helpful is Lois Gibbs from the Center of Health and Environmental Justice.
She's been doing this for 30 some odd
35
years.
years.
35 years. That's amazing.
Right, because and you know, even local people, you know, Denise Brock, Kay Dry, anybody that's found themselves up against an agency are really in a situation that they didn't expect. You know, there's no book for this. You can't just open a book that says what happens when you find out.
Lois Gibbs is probably one of the best people in the country, you know, for giving that advice, because she's been fighting incinerators and toxins like dioxin and things like that.
She has been a tremendous help to the moms.
Okay, now one of the things that it seems like government agencies and industry almost likes to suck people into is to believe that you have to understand the complexity of all these issues, and so they'll give you lots and lots of documents to study as if you can't really discuss it, you know, unless you understand all these documents. And it seems to me that one of the tasks of environmentalists is to make the issues clear and simple so that you have goals that you want. How has this worked out in organizing around the West Lake Landfill?
You know, you mentioned Dr. Bob Criss. We have a list of people, the Missouri Coalition for the Environment, local universities. We have a list of people that we've been able to call up and have them explain to us how to understand the material. I would agree that most people don't have to know the material, but unfortunately, if you're going to explain it to someone, it does help. And that's one of, I think, especially for Karen, one of the strong points that we have is that we are just moms. We're used to talking to children, and we have a great ability to bring this down on a level to where most people can understand it. And for those that want to dig a little deeper, go, you know, they can get a little bit more into the weeds, but you don't have to know. As a person in a situation like this, you don't have to know everything about the situation to know there's a problem, you know, and you also...
You don't have to know what every radioactive element breaks down to, and every isotope, and what the health effects are of every single isotope, and all the contradictory research on it.
That's right.
It's nice to know some of that, but you don't have to know all of it.
You don't have to know all of it. And the other thing is, I mean, you have to know enough to be able to explain the problem, but not in great detail. You also do not. It is not up to you to come up with a solution. You don't have to say, here's a problem, and oh no, they won't listen to me unless I have this solution to fix it. You know, some of these solutions, these sites are very complex, like ours. We don't. We don't know what the ultimate solution will end up being, and so they're still listening to us, though. They're acknowledging the problem now, and they acknowledge that there needs to be some sort of fix.
Now, are there goals that people can agree on? Okay.
We have set goals for our organization, as well as have combined with other organizations to achieve the same goals. And so we do have 3 goals that we are striving for.
Okay.
And the first one is a safe and permanent solution to the radioactive waste at West Lake. We don't want to have to revisit this. I don't want my children to be sitting in front of the same elected officials or others in 20 years from now saying it didn't work. Our other goal is that we would like to see a relocation program for those that are living 1 mile within the landfill. There are people that are living right on top of this landfill, and the emissions and the odors.
They need to be able to be financial support in terms of
they
moving
need to be able to get out of there. It is not safe for them to be there. The other thing is that we want a property assurance plan, which would guarantee the the property's assurances and things like that in our community to keep it at a fair market value and keep our tax base up.
I think those are really, I really like what you said about the goals. I know that there's been a lot of controversy about moving the waste or not moving the waste, and I've talked to several of the people who you've mentioned, and of course there's a lot of problems with moving the waste. That is, you expose people as you're moving it. You expose it while it's being transported, and then you have the illusion that you've cleared up all the radioactivity. When, as you've explained at the beginning of the program, if there's porous rock there and it's gone all over, that radioactivity activity is going to be there no matter how much stuff you dig up. There'll be less, but there'll be some. And so I like your idea of compensating people who live within 1 mile, because that's really, I mean, there are some radioactive locations that just need to be told, people are not.
And I should include that in our first goal of the safe and permanent solution, we want to see that be done by the Army Corps of Engineers Foods Rep program.
Yes.
That is one of our main goals, is that this needs to be transferred to the agency that has the experience. And
it's not the EPA.
And it's not the EPA.
And isn't that one of the big problems, that the EPA is handling something which the Environmental Protection Agency really does not have the experience.
They don't.
And the expertise.
They have higher cleanup levels for some of this stuff because they simply don't know enough about it. The Foods Rep agency, and they're right down the street. They're cleaning up over 100 sites right now in St. Louis. They're already here. They're very familiar with this waste.
Now, have you contacted any elected officials to talk to them about what they could do?
Yes, we've had our fill with elected officials. It's very important to reach out to them. We have educated them. Unfortunately, many of them were in the same situation that we were in, which is they didn't know much about it. And it took a lot of time spent sitting down with them, showing them these documents. We had more luck showing the elected officials the smoking gun documents that we had found versus the Environmental Protection Agency.
Yes, I can believe that.
So, but we've also, as I said, this isn't a science battle anymore. It's a political battle, and the more you get to be with the elected officials, and the more open and honest they are, and right now, they're to the point where they're laying all their cards out on the table. So we're really seeing what it's going to take to get this site taken care of, and the politics are pretty disgusting.
So you really have to, you're not satisfied with just a yes, I'll look into it from a politician. You really want to get some commitment and exactly what the person's going to do and exactly when they're going to do it.
We do. We want our goals met.
And I think it's very wise, because one of the mistakes that environmentalists often make is to argue with agencies. And they have their rules set by the executive. They can't change it. By talking to the elected officials, you're talking about people who are the policymakers. We're going to take another break, and we will be back in just a couple of minutes after these announcements. Welcome back for the final minutes of the discussion about Shadow of the Mushroom Cloud, West Lake. I have a couple of people who have been organizing furiously on the West Lake landfill issues. I have Karen Nickel and Don Chapman. Thanks again. Now, let me ask you something I haven't asked you before. Is it true that most of the people working on this are retired, have really not very much to do with their lives, don't have to spend very much time taking care of their own children, and they can just easily spend as much time as possible?
I wish I could say that was true for us, but unfortunately, that's not the situation. We do have families. Dawn has 3 young children. Mine are a little bit older. But we have devoted a lot of our time. We are literally just moms devoting our time to this issue.
Right. I mean, it's become a full-time job for us, and that's, fortunately, we have the support of our husbands and our families. But it is sad because it takes away. There's school concerts that we don't get to go to because we're hosting public community meetings on the issue. Right.
And so one of the things that we wanted to mention is that there is legislation that was introduced in November of 2015?
Yes.
And will probably be before the U.S. Senate and House of Representatives all throughout 2016. Now, maybe 2017 too. What sort of legislation is that?
Well, we got both senators and both congressmen and congresswomen bipartisan to introduce legislation to move the site from the Environmental Protection Agency to the Foods Rep Army Corps of Engineers program. So.
Okay, I think we're about done, and I want to thank both of you for participating in the discussion. I want to thank the viewer for tuning in, and I want to urge everyone to look at Green Time the same time next week.